Welcome, Hotshots, to Flashlight by Firepower X. Here you can find the industrial strength tools you need to dominate your personal and professional wellness as a firefighter. My name is Jess. I'm creator of Firepower X, former firefighter, and your host for today's webinar. And I am super stoked to sit down with an excellent guest today, Mr. Mathias Gran. Mathias is an entrepreneur, an MBA adjunct faculty at Daniels College of Business at the University of Denver here in Colorado, executive director at Brooks Stevens Inc., creator of the Awesome Points app, and parent of two. And the connecting thread across these skills of his is a deep curiosity and appreciation for people, their stories, their ambitions, and how we can deliver rewarding and affirming experiences to them. Welcome, Mathias. I'm so glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Jess. I'm honored that you reached out and very happy to be here.
Yes. So as I was internet stalking you, as I do for all of my guests, and preparing for this chat today, I noticed that your core values kept popping out in the language that you used about yourself. How did you discover that authenticity and understanding were foundational values to you?
This is such a big first question. Um, and it really came through doing a lot of personal work on myself. So a little backstory to lead into values
Mhm.
is that when I went to grad school, I was a very neurotic, high-strung person and was just doing my best to survive. And most people thought that I was confident and should be. Many people saw me as someone who was, reliable and normal. But underneath all of that was constant running narratives of lack of worthiness and just internal struggle that I think maybe a lot of us can relate to, having the secret story that we can't tell.
Mhm.
So when I was there, I actually started. Um, I was really, and this might not land with you first responders because you're so courageous, and you can run into chaos literally as your job. But for me, chaos would be crippling. And so I needed to seek some professional guidance on how to manage that storm within. And I started to open my eyes to this whole world of, like, what happens when you start showing up as who you are? What happens when you start dropping some narratives that hold you back? What
Mhm.
happens when you can just exist and be? And the answer for me was just effortless. When I learned how to show up and be available emotionally and physically for others,
Mhm.
my whole world changed. And so my core values of authenticity and understanding came out of really a lot of self-discovery work. And there are some deep stories behind each of those core values that maybe we can get into on this call as well. But authenticity is really about showing up as who you are, no agenda. This is what I bring, having the confidence to stand in that.
Mhm.
And understanding, I have as three tiers. There's understanding self. So to know self and to have others know you is to be
Mhm.
understood. It's to understand you and hear your truth. And then the final tier to that is to create understanding between people.
Mhm.
So knowing that that's how I now live my life and let my life force emerge in the world has been very freeing. But it's also, to live these values all the time it can also be lonely. People don't expect you to show up fully all the time, and it can
Mhm.
be disruptive, but
Mhm.
disruptive and empowering. It's a long journey and a long story, but that's where
Uh-huh.
the core values come in.
Uh-huh. That's excellent. That's also what I've found. There's definitely a courage in doing that. So let's not lessen your courage because
Thank you.
I really, and I think that's why core values matter a lot to the fire service because of that peace of mind it brings of really being authentic, you know? Um, but can you kind of just compare and contrast quickly, like when you say before and after, my life
Mhm.
changed? That's a very vague statement. So can you just give us a little taste of what both sides of life were like before you really define that?
Yeah, I like that we're getting very real very fast, because that means we're gonna have a good hour together. Um, so life before, I would say I was in a quiet struggle full of sometimes self-sabotage, but just an overwhelming lack of um, maybe confidence. It's not quite the right word, but just wrestling with some hidden handicaps. I called them invisible handicaps at the time before I had more language around it. But being a very anxious person, having regular intense panic attacks, going from like a 0 to 10 in half a second, multiple times a week,
Hmm.
it was just very disruptive and crippling. And I ended up just crawling deeper and deeper, deeper into a cave or into a hole. It wasn't depression, so it wasn't that scary, dark place, but it was just this constant struggle. Life felt like it wasn't set up for me, like I didn't belong in this on this earth in the way that I was made. And that's a very hard, isolating narrative to carry around. There are also family dynamics going on that, as I was learning to come out of that dark place, I was confronting some things that I was taught growing up, survival skills of my parents that didn't serve me, and it was a very hard process to confront just because things you think are true, things I thought were true, turned out to not be true. And just that constant unfolding it can be very challenging work. So my life before was constantly on edge, um, constantly, I felt like I was pretending,
Hmm.
felt like I was unwelcome,
Hmm.
just very isolating. And to survive that narrative, I really just kind of numbed my body and emotions for better part of 2 decades.
Hmm.
So I was really taken out. I had a I had a traumatic experience late in college that just took me down, and I wasn't anticipating telling the story, but I think it's so core to where you and I spend a lot of our professional and emotional energy.
Hmm.
Um, so so I had this traumatic experience at the end of college, and it really ramped up that anxiety, and it presented itself um, as having panic around any meal, any eating situation. So it wasn't an
Hmm.
eating disorder like anorexia, like it wasn't related to body image, anything like that, but it was just intense trigger around this trauma area
Hmm.
every time we'd eat. And it got so bad that I couldn't actually eat anything outside of my parents' home.
Hmm.
And I thought I was actually going to die. Like I really,
Wow.
I say it with a smile, but I shouldn't, because it was intense. And I remember laying on my parents' couch, and I looked at across the room in the corner of the room, and I hallucinated a giant face coming
Hmm.
out of the corner of the room.
Hmm.
And it was this woman, and she was beautiful, but she was very sad, and she just shook her head twice,
Hmm.
and then she disappeared. And she wasn't full formed. It was sort of like Magic Eye. You can sort
Hmm.
of like
Yeah.
see a 3D thing pop out of the page. That's sort of what it was like. But I
Hmm.
hallucinated this sad, big woman's face, and my interpretation of that was that this was a message to me that it wasn't my time to leave, and that this wasn't going to take me down. So that was the before.
Hmm.
Very deep pain that I masked for a really long time and just tried to get through it. And
Hmm.
then the after was I've been complete the whole time. I just didn't have the framing and the support and the narratives and the language to help me understand that.
Hmm.
Um, so when I spoke earlier about it being effortless to show up, what was missing was connection to humans.
Hmm.
And I think that's what I discovered is my gift is I carry around this bag of magic dust, and I can help see what's going on in a situation. I can help see you. I can connect with you.
Hmm.
So the after is really about just being grateful and present and ready and here and courageous enough to be the whole person that I am.
Hmm.
It's a long
Much of
story.
no, that's great. There was a lot of golden nuggets in there. Much of what you said is familiar to my experience of kind of the before and after my own walking through wastelands of my own mind of
Hmm.
like getting lost, not only in stories that we think are true, yeah, and I think as in the fire service particularly, it's the time that we're at home when this happens. That's really with a lot of unfortunately the suicide statistics, and it's the off-duty time when your mind is left to its own devices when you confront this stuff.
Yeah.
And then turn to, unfortunately, our habits, drinking, avoidance, PTSD, a lot of those coping mechanisms that aren't necessarily helpful or healthy. Um, so that's I've heard you a couple times now say narratives, and what role does story have in this? Because that's come up a few times since you started talking with us.
Yeah. So, I wish I were a more credentialed psychologist. I'm more just an experiential psychologist, which is
You're in good
having,
company.
yeah, having spent lots of time with people and learning about patterns and how to think about things.
Hmm.
So I kind of blur, I could be misrepresenting more academic angles on this, but narratives to me are the belief systems and the stories that we carry to make sense of what's going on within and without, so
Hmm.
internally and externally. And we learn these through experiences. So a little bit of brain science, like the world is giving us sensory input that gets processed through our emotional center down near our brain stem before it makes it into our thinking center of our brain. And so our whole world is an emotional experience first.
Hmm.
And to be able to make sense of that, we create stories and structure around that sensation and the way our brain is processing it. So when
Hmm.
I talk about narratives, I talk about the things that we consider to be true based on what our lived experience tells us.
Yeah.
So an example of this might be there's something wrong with me for feeling this way.
Hmm.
I think it's a really common narrative around people who are struggling and have experienced struggle
Hmm.
is why can't I hack this? Why do I feel this way? There's clearly something wrong with me,
Hmm.
right? That is a blatantly false narrative
Hmm.
because when you're in community with people who do work like this regularly, you will learn that we are all whole and we just have to connect to that
Hmm.
and give ourselves permission to live through that lens.
Hmm.
And so narratives are for me, it is the voice and the parts of us that tell us what is happening, even if that's not true.
Hmm.
To build in some more psychological points of view on this, there's in the counseling world, there's family systems is one area of counseling, and the whole idea behind that is not about your nuclear family, like your family in your home,
Hmm.
but it's about the family of voices, the parts of you the parts of you that you carry around
Yeah.
and navigating those. And so, some very interesting work that was impactful to me in my journey
Hmm.
was actually taking these little Matthiases out
Hmm.
and putting them in a room in a
Hmm.
visualization activity and actually talking to them
Yeah.
because these voices that tell you these things and bring these narratives forward are actually just trying to help. They're
Hmm.
just learned defense mechanisms
Hmm.
typically, but being able to have a conversation with that part of you can be very, very helpful because it leads you to be able to say, thank you, but I've got this, right?
Yeah.
Like, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I have some agency in this situation that I need to claim.
Hmm.
So, how's that for an intro to narratives?
Yeah, that's awesome. It reminds me when I found core values, it very much felt like I was replacing, quieting those old voices, the old
Mhm.
narrators at the table, and then bringing in some more mature, professional, focused voices, like where they were the ones that then started to advise me. And it very
Yeah.
much, I did an exercise very much like that, where it was like, okay, they're all at the table. So I understand how powerful that can be, and how no matter how awesome we think we are, even as a firefighter, like this stuff is things, we never learn this through natural educational mechanisms, right? This is
Yeah.
rarely taught to us from our families or in school. Like we have to go out and find it and participate in it. So, yes, I agree with all this. So bang an answer. But
Yeah.
so let's
I,
go ahead.
I just want to build on it though. And
Yeah.
these narratives, I like to use it, narratives and belief systems, the parts from family systems. I like to use these because I think they're very approachable. Not that the work is easy, but I think it's relatable. I think we can all, in any given moment in our day, even if we just take 1 minute and reflect, like
Hmm.
right now, what are these parts telling us?
Hmm.
Um, and maybe on this call, I don't feel this to be 100% true, but I'm sure there's a part of me in the past that would have come forward right now in this call and said, you better do a really good job on this call
Hmm.
because if you say something stupid or you offend Jess's audience,
Hmm.
you'll never hear the end of it. Like
Hmm.
the stakes are really high. You have to do well.
Hmm.
And that's really not the predominant narrative anymore. But I
Hmm.
think it's relatable for us to hear the stories that we're telling ourselves if as
Hmm.
long as we just take a minute to pay attention.
Yes. Attention, huge, huge capacity that we have. Um, and I'm curious in your work as an adjunct faculty at Daniels College of Business and guiding students through their journeys and creating positive change for them. How then does that, let's keep continue the story thread. Like when you hear them tell their narratives, like how does that weave in with what your learned experience and how do you help them?
There's so many amazing layers to this answer and this question. Um, I think for anyone who teaches, and you can relate, Jess, I'm sure, the joy of it is seeing people grow. The joy of it is seeing people take a risk and learn from that risk, and you can be there to be a part of that growth.
Hmm.
It is the best. It feels even better, I think, than noticing my own growth is seeing it in someone else.
Hmm.
So, in helping MBA students navigate that journey, I think first and foremost, it is a lot of empathy
Hmm.
because I get a wide range of students in the MBAs, but a common narrative is I need to prove myself. Like I'm
Hmm.
here to stand out. I'm here to advance my career. I'm here to achieve some higher status than I think I have or possibly even deserve.
Hmm.
And so it's really I'm so grateful for the handful of students each term because it's not everyone. I wish it was everyone, but there's a handful of students each term who, for whatever reason, bringing this conversation into their life was critical. Like they
Hmm.
needed to hear it, or they were ready to do the work, or they could see where it was going, and they just go all in. And I'm getting chills thinking about it. The stories of the students who really take it on
Hmm.
um, it's they're like different people in 10 weeks, you know?
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that I have magical gifts. I'm just saying that this work is so powerful and I want to invite everyone into it because chances are you're an amazing human being who's hiding some stuff and hiding yourself,
Hmm.
and the world deserves to see you because that's just the
Ooh,
truth.
that gives me chills.
Yes.
So how do you facilitate that as a professor versus kind of, I think most people think of therapy and how it's just talking your problems out, but how do you do it as a professor? How do you kind of help that along for a student?
Yeah, it's a unique container because it I intentionally and I'm very privileged to have a class that lends itself to this sort of
Hmm.
approach. I'm not teaching accounting where it's very finite and practical. I mean, it is very practical, but it's not finite. It's dynamic.
Hmm.
And so the way that I am privileged to introduce these ideas is really through, hey, here's some structure. Like here's some points of view
Hmm.
on what's going on in organizations.
Hmm.
80% of the time, we promote the wrong person into a leadership role because they're an excellent individual contributor.
Hmm.
Gallup studies this, so this is real numbers.
Hmm.
80% of the time, we put the wrong person in the seat because they're great at their job.
Hmm.
But in leadership roles, it's a completely different skill set. It's
Hmm.
about service and listening and empathizing and connecting and supporting and challenging. Most people don't do any of that work as individual contributors.
Hmm.
So I can imagine in the firehouse where you have a very tight chain of command, a very clear hierarchy, it can be very easy to say, go do your job, go do what's asked of you.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those of us who have experienced great leaders get something in addition to that. They
Mm-hmm.
get someone who sees and welcomes them and understands how they can best be utilized in a situation and is giving them opportunities to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So when I teach, I lay out, hey, here are some perspectives. What do we think about these perspectives?
Mm-hmm.
And let that challenge of this feels uncomfortable. I don't know if I'm ready to share. I don't know if I'll ever be ready to share.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is BS. I'm going to ignore it for 6 weeks. But in giving them this place to just say, look, your grade doesn't depend on you agreeing with me.
Yeah.
Your grade depends on you trying this on
Mm-hmm.
and reflecting on what that feels like
Mm-hmm.
and how your perspectives shift. That's a very different class than a lot of people get and a lot of people expect from an MBA program. And so that's it's my gift to be able to facilitate that.
That is cool. I really wish I had had more professors like you in my college experience. Our classes were just way too large, I think, to be able to do that.
That's a
But
great point. I mean, if I have, I think the first class that I adopted was really designed for 12,
mhm,
because you need that really deep personal touch to be able to see the nuance and
mhm,
nudge people. But yeah, I ran it with two sections of 20, and that was really hard because I just couldn't connect as well to the
yeah,
individual. So I'm with you. Size absolutely makes a difference.
yeah. And that's where we do kind of have an advantage in the firehouse because we are smaller groups.
Hmm.
There's maximum, I mean, even at a large firehouse, you're lucky to get 8 people on shift. I mean, those are your largest
Sure.
firehouses. So there is a lot of time together in small groups,
Hmm.
especially opportunities with your leadership, you know, to connect. And unfortunately, from the statistics I've seen, like one of the highest sources of stress is your immediate supervisor in the firehouse. That is like 90% of firefighter stress is from crappy leadership. And so
Yep.
the situation is ripe for this, for actually for personal growth and um empathetic listening, empathic. I never know which one to say, but
I think empathetic is preferred.
yeah,
Yeah.
empathetic listening, to happen at work. Like it
Yeah.
really is because, you go out, you run the call, you come back, you decompress together. So there's a lot of opportunity, from what it sounds like, to have the exact same scenario.
Yeah,
So,
that makes total sense to me. And just to back up what you're saying, Gallup, I love Gallup. To me, it's amazing that Gallup only has a 250,000 followers on LinkedIn, but like Tony Robbins has like 4 million
uh,
because like Gallup's like the source. They have the best global data on organizational dynamics and behavioral dynamics.
uh-huh.
And they wrote a book in 2019 called It's the Manager. And they
Hmm.
found in their study, and it's not really a book, it's like a series of bulleted lists because they
Hmm.
know executives need to read it. And so they're not going to write a book. So so it reads very fast because it's
Uh-huh.
just like 21 pagers.
Yeah.
But in there they reveal the research that says 70% of the variance. So I sound like a professor right now, so forgive me, but I'll explain this in case your audience isn't social science
Hmm.
enthusiasts. So 70% of the variance in engagement at work is directly related to the quality of their first line supervisor.
Yeah.
And so what that means in social science terms is if you were to do a mathematical analysis of all the ways that researchers have thought that might influence your engagement,
Hmm.
the one factor that stood out is the quality of your manager.
Hmm.
And a zero point 0.7 or a 70% coefficient is insanely high. In social science, a 0.15 or 15% is considered very strong.
Hmm.
So this is like 5 times a strong outcome.
Hmm.
So I'm just trying to be very clear, like this is a big deal. It's a very clear finding that, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all that the way we are treated at the firehouse makes a big, big difference to our ability to show up every day.
Hmm. Exactly. And, the level of transparency that person brings, if they are allowing emotions at work, if they're, um, you know, if they feel comfortable and safe enough to reveal their own struggles, or if they keep it quiet but everybody knows, that's another, it's like everybody already knows what's going on with you. Do you? so
Right.
so yeah,
Yeah.
but
On that topic, I think with so I've taught several students who came from the Air Force Academy, and
mhm,
there's they have the same struggle in their numbers with self-harm and suicide. It hurts my heart because it's here are people that want to be of service and feel stuck and
yeah,
feel alone and desperate and isolated.
mhm,
Um, and I noticed that at least in this small sample of folks that have come through that channel,
mhm,
that ingrained hierarchy and command and control, which is so useful to keep you safe on the job,
mhm,
is also the portal that is hard to walk through. And I've heard from my Air Force students over and over that, you have a job to do, leave your shit at the door,
mhm,
leave your stuff at the door and go do your job. And the science says that's just not possible.
mhm,
We think we can, like multitasking. We think we can multitask, but we can't. We just context switch.
yeah,
We can't actually, if we're grieving loss, if we are overwhelmed by a pressure in our home or a society,
mhm,
that doesn't change when we clock in. We
mhm,
just are allowing ourselves to be distracted.
yes,
And
mhm,
so my point of view, and it's a struggle for people, like I get challenged on it a lot, but my point of view is let's not run from this. Let's run toward it and see what we can do in our team and our organization to make it okay.
mhm,
Like, yeah, it's okay to be in struggle. Am I a trained professional? Am I expecting everyone to feel confident enough to like heal you from that struggle? No, like that's not what I'm saying. But
mhm,
what goes a really long way is just having someone say, "You want to talk about it?
mhm,
I'm here."
yeah,
That sounds really hard.
yes, but it's
It,
possible. It is possible. There's a courage in that and opening that door with someone else, especially
yeah,
at work. And I have a quote from you that I found. I have an absurd confidence that feelings belong at work because they're already there. I love
that's
that.
it.
Do you yeah.
Yeah, I used to pitch, and I haven't in a while, but I used to pitch that the F word that belongs at work is feelings.
Hmm.
Because like I shared earlier, our entire neurology processes through our emotional core first.
Hmm.
So they are everywhere. And a surprising statistic around emotional literacy, this is just being able to name what you're experiencing
Hmm.
in yourself. We are on average so poor at this that most people can only name three emotions: happy, sad, and angry or afraid.
Hmm.
Like that's it. And that isn't me saying you're terrible for only having three words, but that's me saying, the book I'm teaching out of this term has 85 emotions in it, and that's a short list.
Hmm.
So there's a very rich experience that we're all having, but most of us have been trained to or believe that we should swallow it and turn it off.
Hmm.
But the problem is when you turn off, particularly the negative ones, they fester and grow.
Hmm.
But if you shine light on them, they dissolve. And so it's about finding that community and that safe place and that support. So the things that you're experiencing can be observed. Like
Hmm.
the first step is always noticing.
Yeah.
And when we keep hiding and muting and stifling, we just don't give ourselves the chance to make new meaning,
Hmm.
to challenge, to reframe. All
Hmm.
these skills, like these aren't human being characteristics. These aren't like Jess is an amazing human. She has these skills. It's more of Jess is amazing. She's developed these skills,
Hmm. Yeah.
and everyone can.
Yes. We all have that, yes, capability and the insight to be able to do this.
Mhm.
I would love to pivot it towards family life because I feel like that plays a really big role in where these things come from a lot of the time,
Absolutely.
right? Where we
Yeah.
learn them initially and then perpetuate.
Uh-huh.
Um, so as a parent, let's weave that piece in for you. How do you How do you make sure your kids don't take on narratives that are unproductive? How do you do that? What's your secret?
Have you met my kids? I think being a parent is the hardest job. Some people I think were really born for it, like they have like some gifts there.
Hmm.
I don't feel like I have those gifts. I care a lot about interrupting the intergenerational pain
Hmm.
and the intergenerational pattern.
Hmm.
So that would be my goal to my children is that when I launch them out into the world, maybe they're better equipped than any generation prior.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't think there's a secret here. I think that when it comes to raising kids, they crave your time and attention.
Hmm.
And that's hard for us to give.
Hmm.
And it's even harder when we are carrying our stuff and working so hard to make sure our stuff doesn't bubble out.
Hmm.
Uh, if we're just pushing down, pushing down, pushing down, and getting through the day, we really can't be fully present for our kids.
Hmm.
And this might seem oversimplified, but my both of my children have emotional and mental differences.
Hmm.
And one of my kids, we actually moved to Texas for a month to go to an intensive program to help them through a struggle.
Hmm.
And in doing that, we were introduced to tools that we already had, such as, I'm sure the firehouse is full of people who read mommy blogs,
Hmm.
but just in case they aren't, there's something called special time, which is like a
Hmm.
mommy blogged version of just sitting with your kid and noticing.
Yeah.
That's it. And so for some people, it's so hard. Like I really like structured activities like board games and
Hmm.
stuff like rolling dice and playing cards, and the randomness of that game is what makes it interesting and fun.
Hmm.
But it's what they really want is for you to just sit there and just notice.
Yeah.
And so there's this approach we were taught called filial therapy, Filial,
Uh-huh.
and it's simply narrating. So
Hmm.
special time, if you look on mommy blogs, is just you're sitting there and you're going, "Hey, you picked up that car. Look, it looks like you're driving it down that imaginary road. Look, it swerved."
Hmm.
You're just noticing what's going on.
Hmm.
And studies say like even 5 minutes every other day of just sitting and paying attention
Hmm.
helps your child feel like they matter. Because the fundamental core need that everyone in your firehouse has, and I have, and you have, Jess, is to be seen, heard, and understood.
Yeah. Yeah.
So by sitting with your kiddo and just being like, oh, you picked up the triangle.
Mhm.
It seems trite, it seems trivial, but that approach
Uh-huh.
models to them, I'm noticing you and I'm paying attention. So that's the first step is noticing and paying attention.
Yeah.
Um, the other things that I think I try to do well as a parent is we're very strict about negative words in our house.
Hmm.
Um, if our kids come home and say like that's so stupid or they're so stupid,
Hmm.
we cut that shit right out because it's damaging. I can't remember your full story, and I'm sure you've told it in bits, but somewhere along the line you adopted negative narratives,
Hmm. Yeah.
and me too. And part of my adoption was repetition. People just telling me I was weird and different and didn't fit. While
So
it's like,
weird. Yes.
yeah, like maybe they're right. Maybe I don't fit.
Yeah, and then you
And then
start using it and your own narrator picks it up.
exactly. And then there's that part of you that shows up and is like, who says you don't fit? I'm gonna mess them up. And but they're not here anymore. So you just keep your guard up for the rest of your life
Yeah.
because that'll hurt. And that's not very helpful.
Hmm.
And that was part of sorry, I'm talking a lot about me right now, but like that was part of my growth was
Yeah.
it was confusing to me to receive acceptance.
Hmm. Yeah.
It was confusing to me when I got out of those self-harming and purposefully hurtful narratives
Hmm.
and got into experiences where I could just be because people were like, damn, he's got his shit together.
Hmm.
And of course, like I told in the story earlier, I was just doing my best to fake it and like make it through it. And so it was very confusing. And I had cognitive dissonance around like, wait, this room is telling me that I'm enough.
Hmm.
This room is telling me that I'm interesting and useful. is that true? Like, I don't have any way to know if that's true because I've adopted all these negative narratives that were given to me.
Mhm. Yes. I like that. And it goes beyond just, I think, swear words. I don't have children of my own, but from the kids I have been around, uh yeah, this perpetuation of like everything sucks. If they come home, they're just like bored with life.
Mhm.
Like that, I think yeah, so nipping those stories in the bud early and just being like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, that's not an area of your mental map you want to set up house in, where then
Yeah.
everything you look at, everything you lay eyes on is going to suck and be boring and you're
Yeah.
not interested. And so,
Yeah.
there's a lot of value in that. And I want to touch on awesome points real quick before we pivot off of parenthood, because tell us about awesome points. What is it? It's an app.
Yeah.
What did you make? How does it help parents and kids?
Yeah. Sure. Well, I'm going to build a little bridge from where we just were into awesome points.
Okay.
So the other thing that I think is really, really important that you can practice no matter what age your kid
Hmm.
is to disassociate, to tear apart the behavior that you're observing from
Hmm.
the character of the kid. And this also works with your teams and your organization. So what I teach MBAs is good feedback is specific, but it's about what you're seeing, like what you're observing. I noticed that you were late, that you showed up late today, and it
Hmm.
had this impact to our crew for the next shift. That's a lot different than um, like you are irresponsible,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so when we interact with our kids in particular, and something that I think we can all practice between our kids and adults is they will make very bad choices
Yep.
over and over and will
Uh-huh.
tear us down. Like we will be depleted from trying to manage that. But the important story is that was a bad choice that had this impact, which
Yeah.
is different than you are bad. Like you're a bad kid for making that choice. No,
Hmm.
it's about a decision, it's about a behavior. Mistakes are powerful because you can recover from them.
Hmm.
But if you think I am the problem, if we teach our kids to think I am a problem, that sets them up for a lot of really challenging mental health problems as they age.
Yeah. That makes total sense.
Yeah. So behaviors, not character. And
Yes.
I don't know if you want to add on that, but I was going to go into awesome points next.
Go for it.
Okay. So I talked about moving to Texas earlier for this intensive program for one of my kids, and
Hmm.
part of that treatment included this chart where in the morning there were like nine choices that could be made, and there were challenges. This was intentionally a challenging program to help change a behavior
Hmm.
related to patterns, fear. So it was a phobic response. It was a learned phobic response to a traumatic event. So the
Hmm.
way the therapy works is it's a little bit like exposure therapy, where we're going to give you small doses of that same experience for you to see that it's actually unrelated to your behavior.
Hmm.
You're actually safe in that thing that you think is really scary. And so there were nine little challenge squares in the morning. And if my kiddo got 7 out of the 9, they got like infinity screen time in the afternoon. Like it was amazing over the top reward, right? And
Hmm.
in the afternoon, there were nine more blocks that would relate to the morning the next day. And they sent us home. And my kid had a huge turnaround. It was just like hardest moment as an adult to see a little kid really struggling into proudest moment as an adult seeing that same child almost fully recovered. It was amazing,
Hmm.
amazing team. But they're like, just continue the chart at
Hmm.
home. We're like, well, they're going to school. I'm not there.
Yeah.
I don't expect someone who's managing 30 other little kids to possibly implement this one-off system for this one child.
Hmm.
That's not going to work. So I built Awesome Points as a way to say there are some easy things and some hard things that we can do every day. So, for example, one of them is closing our dresser drawers after we pick out clothes.
Hmm.
My kids are, for some reason, that's a huge struggle for them is to just push the door closed. So we set up a behavior in Awesome Points to say, hey, if you close your dresser drawers in the morning, we'll give you 15 points. So that would be an easy one. A harder one of my kids has sensory sensitivities and they don't like getting in the shower. And so that's a real challenge for them. So we put like 100 points on taking a shower. So we have this menu of different really awesome choices that they can make any
Mhm.
day, and they can make as many of them as they want. It's infinity points, like earn as many points as you want to give them autonomy and agency. And after they earn enough points after doing these behaviors, then they get some award, and that's up to the family. So for
Mhm.
us, we put $20 on a debit card, and
Mhm.
we don't get an opinion on what they spend it on as long as it's nonviolent.
Mhm.
So that's their big prize. But it
Uh,
used to be we'll go to Target and you can pick out something,
mhm.
for less than $20. So
Mhm.
it'll be like a special trip. And other
Mhm.
people, we have other families on the platform who do like, you can have a sleepover on mom and dad's room tonight, or we can go get ice cream,
Mhm.
whatever. But the general idea is I see you doing good things.
Mhm.
I notice you, back to that paying attention and filial therapy. I'm
Mhm.
noticing you doing these things. I'm praising you for doing these things. And in the end, you get something really, really fun for doing it.
Mhm.
So that's the Awesome Points app. It's just a simple, quick, on your phone way to track. Hey, you're doing great. Trains me to notice, trains them to raise their hand and say, I close my dresser drawers.
Mhm.
So we're modeling for them. Hey, these are great choices. We're happy to celebrate these with you. Keep it up.
Mhm. And for our listeners who don't know Matthias, you are a software developer, which is why you could develop an app, right?
It's one of the points on my resume. Yeah, I'm a recovering software engineer. Um, yeah,
So,
so I built this for our
uh,
kiddos,
uh-huh.
and now it's open to anyone. So right now we just opened it up,
Mhm.
and I know this will be broadcast later than our recording. So we're in late fall right now, and we've
Mhm.
got we're trying to get people on the platform to give us feedback and see how we can make it better. But you
Mhm.
can just go to awesomepoints.app
Mhm.
and in a web browser. So that's awesomepoints.app,
Mhm.
and smash the start free trial button and get your kiddos set up and start celebrating their awesome choices.
That is really great. And we'll put that link in the show notes as well. But how does it benefit the parents too, the app?
Yeah, so I say it's a dual training program.
Hmm.
So it trains the kids to notice their great choices and instill them with a bit of pride in making great choices. It's
Hmm.
it's very nice to have clarity and context to say these are all in bounds all the time. It gives them a
Hmm.
little structure so they can just go and have success. That's useful.
Hmm.
So it trains them to make good choices. Uh, but the more important, the harder struggle is on the adult side. It trains us to pay attention
Mm,
because that's what they want.
yeah.
It's not the same as sitting down and noticing cars and noticing triangular wood blocks, like we said. It's not the
Hmm.
same as just having free play,
Hmm.
but we're at least most parents I know are exhausted every day. And it's hard for us to prioritize these really important small things. So it trains us to say, I'm so proud for washing your hands after school. Like, thank you. Here's 20 awesome points. It's
Hmm.
so helpful to put your dish in the dishwasher after dinner. Here's 20 awesome points.
Hmm.
Or my favorite is I also encourage families to have a bonus, just like a generic bonus behavior.
Hmm.
So one of my kiddos is having a really hard time completing work at school, but last
Hmm.
week they stayed after and got all their homework done. So they didn't have any take home work
Hmm.
for a whole week. And so that's like shower him with awesome points.
Yeah.
So we have a structure in place, language in place, so
Hmm.
we can just shower them for making good choices.
Hmm. That sounds really fun. And I really want to participate, but I have no children to do awesome points with.
I think
So
I hear you saying you want to get awesome points too. I think you
yeah,
wish,
I think we
yeah.
all, when Matthias, offline we've discussed, I that this would be a great idea in the firehouse because I think the same thing happens is that we often feel overlooked, especially by the chief. If we're in a
Mhm.
big department, the chief doesn't see us. Sometimes he or she doesn't even know our name. And that it's kind of it erodes that feeling of being seen,
Yeah.
appreciated, understood,
Yeah.
and so. I think Awesome Points would be great in the firehouse as well. And if I can figure out a way to make it happen, that will we'll, we'll figure out how to collab on that. But for
Yeah, well,
now, yeah, if our any of our listeners would like to participate, check that link out below because I think it's a great opportunity.
yeah, and I'll just add to that, even though we're laughing about this sort of child-centric app, the same science applies to adult behavior change. A common mistake we make is that we set an unachievable goal, we set an unrealistic goal, or
Hmm.
we think that if we just tell our team what we need from them, that they'll magically start doing it.
Hmm.
And that works in really fear-based environments, but fear-based environments aren't actually where people really do their best work. So if we want to see a shift in behavior in an organization, it's really the same principle. It's saying what good looks like, and then it's helping people achieve that good step and paying attention and noticing and recognizing them for doing so. So if one of the things we need to do is maybe this is a bad example because maybe it's ingrained already, but it's like get your gear put back on the rack at the end of your shift in a reasonable manner, so I don't trip over it when I have to run to the truck. If that's the behaviors, gear is put away. I don't know if it's a checklist or a chart or something in Excel, but some way that we can just say like, hey, our goal is to have a full week with all of our gear put away and we can make progress toward the goal.
Hmm.
That's how we shift behavior in organizations, just the same way.
Hmm. Yes.
Small, achievable steps where I notice.
I think what happens now is we get yelled at. There's still
Yeah,
a lot of like that demand, I demand you to do this. But I don't know,
yeah,
maybe you've got a great lieutenant or captain and you're, you're not getting that at your firehouse, but uh
yeah.
yeah. Is
Well,
there anything?
shame's a very powerful emotion, and
Oh, it
that's why it's
is.
been
I know
used.
it's
But it
true.
isn't a useful emotion to the person experiencing it. It is a shutting down emotion. So yeah, you'll get some great immediate results, but you have to know that you're also hurting that person, whether they'll tell you or not, or whether they will even admit it to their partner. Like having that sort of direction is harmful over
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah, when there are better ways, like
Yeah,
positive reinforcement, right? So,
exactly.
so is there anything we didn't touch on today that you kind of want to return to that we didn't fully flesh out in this chat?
I what I wrote down was actually from your intro, which is about dominating personal wellness and I just thought it was such an interesting way to bring these ideas to a really known like strength-based culture in firefighting. So first, I just want to say thank you to everyone for serving your community. I don't know if you're celebrated enough in your circles, but I have a fire station 2 blocks away, and I'm so grateful that they're ready because I know that when someone needs you, you're going to be ready. So thank you. And then also, I think it's just underneath all of your strong-minded, strong-bodied people are very soft centers. And my wish or invitation is just to start being curious about that because it's a really powerful place, and we can all learn a lot when we start to pay attention there.
Mhm. Yes, I agree. There's a gooey center in most first responders. We get a bad rap for being kind of bitter and hardened, which I think happens sometimes over time of doing the job. But it all began, the seed of it, the root is altruism and wanting to help, wanting
Yeah.
to rescue, wanting to save the day, wanting to swoop in and make everything right.
Mhm.
And there is a wholesomeness in that yeah we, we don't like to talk about, but is there nonetheless. So
Yeah. And my last question is maybe a rhetorical question, but we
sure.
talked about it before we started, and that was I haven't worked with a lot of you listening, and so I'm very naive in ways, but we're also very alike because we're all human. And what I'm curious about is you've all done so much training to remain calm in crisis for others. And so I think the inquiry I have is, what training could you do or what have you done to look at the crisis within if you're experiencing that? Because what I'm teaching tonight in my leadership class is about intercepting those narratives when they come up. When you're in that crisis, when you're triggered, how can you reprogram the way that you experience that so that you don't chew out your employee, so that you don't fire someone out of rage, so you don't get fired out of rage.
Mhm.
And I'm impressed that you can show up in situations that are very hard and execute. And I bet that same skill would apply to the work within.
Mhm. Oh, yes. And I'm just now, and mind you, my view of firefighting is from, having been out for a little while, but I think we're just now coming into the realization that that is a critical skill. Like self-regulation cannot be overlooked anymore.
Mhm.
And so right now we're all trying to navigate, what does that look like? How do we develop language around it, and then programming, and then behavior change, because that they
Mhm.
all have to go together, right? Of actually
Mhm.
making that a reality. So thanks for calling that out, because that's what this podcast webcast is all about. It's doing just that. So thank you for participating in the conversation,
Yeah,
all about
I want to
that.
add. Yeah, I want to add one more thing to it, and
Of
this
course.
is me feeling a little a little embarrassed at first that I struggled with the word regulation for a while, and it's hard because I need to teach these ideas, and I just want to name a misunderstanding that I see and experienced myself,
Hmm.
and regulation does not mean not feeling.
Hmm.
Regulation does not mean erasing the feeling.
Yeah.
Regulation means knowing that you will swing and being able to sort of know that you'll come back and develop skills to sort of reduce the peaks. So instead of being in a reactive mode, we can be in a responsive mode. And I think that's really, really relevant to the training that you've all done. So
Hmm.
it's just doing it inward now.
Yeah, it is. It's the fire service gets to now figure out how we're rescuing ourselves from the fires
Absolutely.
within. So
Absolutely.
using skills we already have. That's the beauty of it. We can just kind of translate, find the stuff that translates. But
Yep.
I always like to leave our viewers with one kind of resource or next step to continue their knowledge from this conversation. What would you recommend to us, Matthias?
Yeah. I think the first one is going to be really straightforward. And that is, I would just ask each of you who are listening to just take a moment and think about who are those people in your life that you can have a candid conversation with. Um, and what, what's one or two new emotion areas that you could identify that you experienced this week? That would be a huge step in the right direction towards just building that awareness. So
Hmm.
simple, but maybe not easy. So
Hmm.
find those supports in your life and just think like, what have I experienced this week? And then the second is if you want to become more of a geek like me for this topic, an audiobook that I found really impactful is by Brene Brown. And some people, when they hear that name, cringe, but others are open. And that is, she had a TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, that most of you, if you've heard of her, you've seen that. She
Hmm.
has an audiobook of the same title, which is
Hmm.
not the same presentation, but it's a live recording of her at a workshop, and she walks through the way that we protect ourselves and we close ourselves off to the world.
Hmm.
And in my opinion, I've listened to it probably 25 times. It's just one of these things that, in my opinion, it really speaks to the human experience. So if you aren't using some of those defense mechanisms yourself, and if that's not perhaps getting you in the way of really showing up, then I don't know if you're alive. Like, you might just be numbed out. So if you're curious, you can go check that out. But I do appreciate if we're disinterested or not willing to go there.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I will put the links to all the links that we mentioned today in the show notes for you to follow up with. If you're still with us and still watching, you're incredible. Thank you for participating in conversations like this. And as always, my door is open to you if you have any feedback or questions after this conversation. You can email me at info@firepowerx.com. And thank you again, Matthias. I really appreciate you being here today,
I
joining
appreciate you,
us.
Jess. Thanks for what you're doing for everybody out there listening.
Yeah, no, it's a passion. It's authentic to me. So I totally relate to that. And we'll see everyone in the next webinar. Thanks, guys.